Hello, I'm Edward October. Over the years, I've narrated more ghost stories, horror shows, and creepypastas than I can count. And yet, the crimes discussed on our true crime podcast managed to scare the shit out of me. This program is not suitable for children or the faint of heart. If you are such a person, go ahead and switch off this podcast. Listen to something else. Are you still with us? Well, we've warned you.
Hey, Jen.
Hey, Kim, how are you?
I'm pretty okay. How are you?
Excited. It's spooky season.
It is the best time of the year for us.
It's the most wonderful time
Not that
of
time.
the year.
It's the most wonderful time
for
for
us. It is. No,
For
it
us.
is. Yes.
Yeah.
I like it better than Christmas.
Yeah, as do I. Hey, I heard you had a special little shout out to give somebody.
I do. We're going to give a big shout out to Mary Ann. She was so sweet. She sent us a donation on PayPal. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Marianne. You help keep the
You're
lights
the
on.
greatest.
And furthermore, you help Nico edit. So that's
Exactly.
because otherwise we would not be here still today. So let's be honest.
crying. We'd be crying.
We'd be crying a lot.
Yep. So
You got
anyways,
Case
I do
for
have a
us, Sam?
case. I do. It's got a little spooky twist in it too.
Ooh,
Since
good.
it's,
Let's
you
hear
know-
it.
Yeah, you ready?
Yeah, so ready.
It's an older case, but
Okay.
it's really interesting. It is. It's a head scratcher too.
Ooh.
It's-
Ooh.
Quote unquote solved, but yeah,
Oh,
I don't think it is.
Not? Oh,
no, I
okay.
don't think it is. All right,
Okay.
are you ready?
Even better. Yes.
I know. On a pitch black stretch of road known as 22 Mine Road in a mountainous corner of Logan County, West Virginia, a truck driver concentrated on the pavement in front of him. Halfway between Williamson and Logan, the Island Creek Coal Company built the two-lane road to get coal trucks from one mine to the other. It's lined with trees from start to finish, with a steady decline, steep cliffs, and only a 2-foot-high guardrail. No streetlights are on the road, and the heavy canopy of trees can be claustrophobic even in the daylight. As the truck driver rounded a corner and listened to the radio softly playing his favorite tune, his headlights picked up something in the distance. Now, truckers are often hyper alert on these stretches of mountain roads because deer and other wildlife can dart out unexpectedly and, cause all sorts of problems. But this wasn't wildlife. This was a woman, possibly a little dazed, walking along the side of the road. Worried that the woman would get hit by a less cautious driver and concerned she may have been in an accident, the driver stopped and offered her a ride. The dark-haired woman smiled at him and got in his truck. She took the seat next to the driver and sat quietly. The driver immediately started in with his small talk, like, "Are you all right? Were you in an accident?" He glanced in his side mirror, grateful that no vehicle was speeding behind him. Quote, "Man, you really shouldn't be out walking on this road at night. There are no lights or anything. You're lucky I didn't hit you," he continued. The woman was extremely quiet. He wondered if his first instinct was correct and she had been in an accident. Maybe she got hit in the head and was unable to talk. "Ma'am," he said, and turned to look at her. But the driver didn't find a scared, timid, dark-haired beauty staring back at him. He found absolutely nothing at all. There was nobody in the truck with him, and he spent the last minute talking to thin air. Now, there are dozens of accounts like this from travelers on Trace Mountain. Some people have seen a woman walking in old-timey clothing. Some say they've seen a woman in a white dress, and some say that they've seen an old car come around the bend only to disappear into the fog. Legend says if you stop your car at the bottom of 22 Mine Road on Trace Mountain, just as you're about to exit onto Highway 119, the ghost will push your car backwards up the mountain. Female apparitions walking lonely, deserted roads in America are nothing new. The famous woman in white ghostly phenomenon can be found from one corner of the country to the other. The ghosts of murdered women, Jilted lovers and even some suicide victims walk lonely highways on an endless loop. Our tales as old as time. But what makes this story stand out is that the ghost, thought to be the restless spirit of Mamie Thurman, wants justice badly enough to push the car of a cautious traveler backwards up the mountain. So why? What's up the mountain? It's the place where, on a night that was oppressively humid and the air was thick with mosquitoes, her dead body was dumped onto the side of the road and kicked into the underbrush. And it was a place that nobody would think to look for her. As a rainstorm moved in later that night, her body continued to lay there, waiting to be found. And as luck would have it, the most unlikely of people would stumble upon her remains while picking wild berries. The discovery would launch a sensational trial and the beginning of a legend. So, are you ready?
I'm so ready. You got me hooked.
All right. The year was 1932, and prohibition and lawlessness permeated Logan County, West Virginia. Coal mine owners and their officials clashed with underpaid miners over creating a union and ongoing strikes. Franklin Delano Roosevelt won his first presidential election a few months later, bringing much-needed relief to the country with his programs designed to help the American people throughout the Great Depression. As for now, the country would struggle as the stock market recorded its lowest numbers in history. Speakeasies, gambling houses, and gangster life permeated every state in the country. And as the newspapers ran with the story of the Lindbergh baby kidnapping, it felt as if America's grit was being tested. In a small 2-room apartment above the garage owned by the president of the city commission lived 48-year-old Alvin Jack Thurman. A native of Kentucky, Jack came from poverty in a very large family. As late as 1920, when he would have been 36 years old, Jack still lived at home with his parents, but not for long. That's the year he met and married a spunky, warm-hearted woman, 16 years younger than him, by the way, and her name was Mamie Morrison. Mamie was also from Kentucky and had an upbringing mired in poverty and her father's alcoholism. Mamie's mother died shortly after her birth of her second child. Mamie's father, unable to work and care for 2 infants, entrusted them to their grandparents. Years later, Mamie's father married a second time and quickly fathered 3 more children. Unfortunately, her father fell into a stream and died of pneumonia in 1928. This meant that his new wife, having no way to care for her 3 children, had to surrender them to an orphanage. Jack Thurman met Mamie Morrison in the spring of 1920 while she was working as a servant in the Jeffries Hotel. Mamie found Jack attractive with his dark hair and gray eyes, and Jack thought Mamie was adorable. The couple moved to Logan, West Virginia in 1924, and Mamie went to work at the Guyan Valley Bank, where her boss, Harry Nibert Robertson, offered her and Jack an apartment above his garage. Harry Robertson not only worked for the bank, but he was also the president of the city commission in Logan, which was just a fancy way of calling him a mayor.
Oh.
At the time, Logan didn't have a mayor or a city council, and the city commission formed the center of the city's government, and Harry Robertson headed it, so basically the mayor. Harry's generosity didn't stop there. He appointed Mamie's husband, Jack, as a patrolman for the police department. And Jack, who didn't drive, worked the graveyard shift. He either worked the beat on foot or he rode with another officer. Logan was a good fit for the Thurmans. Logan was a boom town and doing well financially at the time. These 2 Kentuckians, born into poverty and misfortune, had found themselves in a place with many possibilities and good jobs when much of the country struggled. With her bright smile and good-natured personality, Mamie soon found herself at the center of the social scene. She was active in her church and even taught Sunday school. She enjoyed a good reputation and had several friends, one of which was Louise Robertson, the wife of Harry Robertson. Louise and Harry had 2 children, and Louise enjoyed the benefits of being a wife of one of the city's most prominent citizens. She was the treasurer of the Logan's Women's Club and often played golf with Mamie. and the two attended many social events together. Now, apart from the Thurmans, the Robertsons' property included Oscar Townsend, a boarder unrelated to the Robertsons, and a black man named Clarence Stephenson. Clarence lived in the attic of their home at 510 Stratton Street. Clarence was 29 years old at the time and worked in the coal mines at one point and had lost 2.5 fingers in a coal mining accident. Described as, quote, unusually intelligent, the spring of 1932 found Clarence employed as the odd jobs man for the Robinson, a part-time chauffeur for them, and took care of Harry Robertson's dogs. He often accompanied Harry on fox hunting trips. So we have one man, Harry Robertson, who had lots of local power. He employed Mamie Thurman and her husband, and he was also their landlord. His magnanimous personality meant he opened his home to 2 boarders, Oscar and Clarence. Plus, he was able to give his lovely wife, Louise, an easy life. So what could possibly go wrong?
Famous last words.
In early 1932, the friendship between Louise Robertson and Mamie Thurman had dissolved. Louise correctly suspected that her husband, Harry, was having an affair with Mamie. Underneath all the golfing and fox hunting and church-going and Sunday school teaching was a subculture in Logan, a nightlife rife with gambling, booze, and illicit sex. Now, around 1929, Mamie Thurman and Harry Robertson started their affair amidst this party nightlife. Mamie's husband, of course, worked the graveyard shift, so he was not at home in the evenings. And the odd jobs man, Clarence Stephenson, he would become the couple's go-between. Harry would rent a room at a local boarding house on High Street owned by Finette Jones and rented by the hour, and then send Clarence to pick up Mamie and bring her to him. Sometimes Clarence would just drive the couple to a place where Mamie and Harry would have sex in the car, while Clarence stood by watching for traffic on the road. The couple would also use other meeting places throughout the town, including the Key Club. And even though they made a great effort to keep those liaisons secret, they were seen together at some of the underground parties around town. People talk no matter how careful a clandestine couple is, and it was only a matter of time until Louise became suspicious. Later, Clarence would say that one time Mamie was in the Robertsons' home, and she took a deep breath, sighed, and said, quote, I might be a mistress here someday. Now, it's unknown if Harry made promises to Mamie that he had no intention of keeping, or if she just assumed that Harry would eventually divorce Louise and make her his wife. Either way, the comment reveals a certain naivete on Mamie's part. Shortly after that, Louise confronted her husband Harry about the affair, but she said nothing of it to Mamie or Mamie's husband. Louise just quietly ended her friendship with Mamie. It's unclear what Harry's reaction was to being confronted with the fact that Louise knew about the affair. Still, Louise would later say that she begged him to end the relationship and even started planning evening events for her husband to attend to keep him away from Mamie. And even though she claimed not to have confronted Mamie, according to one newspaper account, Louise did say to her, quote, I want you and Harry to live so that if, quote, anything ever happened, there would be no discredit reflected upon the Robertsons' children. She didn't want the children to have to bear
Her problems.
the family's shame, right?
Yes, yes.
On Saturday, June 18th, 1932, Mamie and Harry met for the last time. Harry Robertson said that there was no fight or falling out during that meeting. In fact, the couple made plans to see each other again on Tuesday night, June 21st. So had he planned to break up on Mamie on the 18th and got cold feet, then scheduled another meeting for the 21st where he would break up with her? Or had he no intention of calling off the affair at all and scheduled another meeting with her on the 21st as though nothing was wrong? Either way, for whatever reason, Harry called off the meeting that was supposed to take place on the 21st. And Mamie Thurman was found dead the next day. On Wednesday, June 22nd, 1932, a deaf man named Garland Davis was picking berries around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. On a decline of Trace Mountain, just 25 feet from 22 Mine Road, Davis was crawling through a briar thicket when he happened upon the body of Mamie Thurman. The location of the body was on the side of the hill, near a dip in the road just before it wound a corner and ended at what was now Highway 119. There was no attempt to hide the body. It appeared as though she had just been tossed out of the car. Startled, Davis ran for help. When the police arrived, they identified the body as that of Mamie Thurman right away because one of the officers knew her personally. They found her wallet containing $8 in change and Lucky Strike cigarettes wrapped in paper. She was still wearing her wedding ring, a small diamond engagement ring, and an expensive watch. This led the investigators to believe that she hadn't been a victim of a botched robbery. Mamie was wearing a blue cotton dress with white polka dots. The fact that the blue dye from her dress had bled onto her underwear convinced investigators that she had been dumped there before it had started raining the night before. And since she was fully dressed, it didn't appear as though the crime was sexual in nature. But one of her shoes was missing, and it was never found. Lying just 30 feet away from her body was her hat. Also found with the body was a piece of paper with a license plate number written on it. And of course, this license plate number was researched, and it led to a dead end. The condition of the body was good, considering she had been found within 12 hours of her death. The autopsy revealed that she had been shot twice in the head, her throat sliced from ear to ear, and her neck was broken at the second cervical vertebrae. There was also a few bruises on her body. About 150 feet from where she lay was an old case knife, which was found days later by two teenagers. At first, authorities believed that the knife was the murder weapon, but it was soon determined that it was too dull to have inflicted any damage. Old case knife, this is weird. There is actually a brand called Case, which does have knives, and it was made in like the late 1800s. Believe me, I know. My husband's now into pocket knives.
Oh, yep, yes.
But it's also, in West Virginia area, a case knife is also, or was also, a butter knife. That's what they called a butter knife.
Oh.
We really don't know exactly. We think that if it would have been like the actual brand, they would have capitalized Case, but we don't know what kind of knife it was. But whatever it was just too dull to have slit Mamie's throat. The police would later suspect that somebody had put the knife there on purpose to throw them off, or it was just a coincidence that the knife was in the proximity of the body. Law enforcement noticed faint tire tracks left in the dirt. The tracks had been mostly destroyed by the rain, so tread marks couldn't be matched to the tires of any suspects. Two physicians examined Mamie's body, Dr. W.S. Rowan and J.E. Robertson, who, incidentally, was the brother of Harry Robertson, Mamie's lover. These two determined that she died anywhere between 12:30 and 2 a.m. They suggested that there was some sort of altercation just before she died because of the bruising above her right eye, but the gash to her throat was most likely what killed her. The throat wound went through the trachea, the jugular, and the carotid arteries. The police felt as though the two headshots, which came from a .38 caliber, were inflicted strictly to ensure death after the fact. It certainly felt like overkill. There were burn marks where the bullets entered Mimi's skull, suggesting that when somebody pulled the trigger, they placed the barrel of the gun directly against her skin. Both bullets entered above her left ear, with one bullet exiting just above her right ear, the other emerging at the top and back of her head. No bullets were recovered from the crime scene. The working theory was that someone cut Mamie's throat in some other location, then brought her body to the mountain. Then 2 shots were fired into her skull, and then her body was dumped. Or they dumped her body and then fired the 2 shots. Either way, the scene on the side of Trace Mountain was just the dump site. When the police interviewed her husband, he was in total shock. Jack Thurman seemed to be in the dark about his wife's affair, like genuinely. According to his testimony, Jack claimed that he and his wife were always on good terms, and he often said good things about her to other people. On the night of the murder, he was working from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., and he stated that when he tried to call her around 1 o'clock in the morning, when he was on duty, he didn't get an answer. But when Jack really became concerned was when he got home and realized that their bed was still made. Nobody had slept in it. He then went to Clarence Stephenson and Harry Robertson, who were at home in the main house, and asked them if they'd seen his wife. Both men said that they hadn't seen her, but went with Jack to help look for her. They didn't discover much information except that somebody had seen Mamie walking on Dingus Street by Middleburg Theater the night before. Jack's whereabouts during the time of his wife's murder were corroborated by coworkers and people out on the street that night. And, he was cleared from having any involvement. However, Jack soon learned things about his beloved wife, Mamie, which left him dumbfounded and heartbroken. He said in the papers, quote, "Mamie was a perfect wife to me, and I cannot realize that she would do such a thing as she's been accused of." When I'm lying awake at 3 a.m. and the house is dark and quiet, well, except for the sound of my snoring husband, I feel like I'm the only one in the world that can't sleep. But according to sleepfoundation.org, I'm not alone. By the time women reach the 45-54 age bracket, 53% are losing sleep due to perimenopause and menopause. When your estrogen levels start to get lower, it can lead to hot flashes and night sweats, not to mention it affects mood regulation and mental health. But it also influences serotonin, which regulates sleep.
With the help of Sleep Cream, you can say hello to a good night's rest. Sleep Cream is a lotion that contains CBD isolate, which is a great natural way to help calm your mind. It also has a light lavender scent that promotes relaxation. Just rub Sleep Cream on your neck. In no time, you will feel relaxed and ready for bed. And don't forget, Sleep Cream doesn't contain THC, so you're not going to feel high or even fail a drug test.
Since I've been using Sleep Cream, I've been sleeping so much better. I don't wake up groggy, and I feel energized and ready to take on the day. Seriously, you need to try Sleep Cream. And if it doesn't work for you after a few nights, Sleep Cream's going to refund your purchase, and you don't have to send anything back. So you really have nothing to lose except more sleep.
Order your bottle at sleepcream.com. That's sleep, CREME.com. Use the code OTC podcast, all one word, at checkout to save $20 on your first order. Go and order a bottle at sleep, CREME.com. Use code OTC podcast, all one word, at checkout to save $20 on your first order. Sleepcream.com.
The police questioned the other boarder at the Robertson house, Oscar Townsend, who had worked with Harry at the bank. And very little is known about Oscar, but he was soon cleared of having anything to do with the murder. Police questioned Louise Robertson, who said she saw Mamie leave her apartment above the garage at about 7:30 on Tuesday evening. She also stated that her husband, Harry, had taken the children to a swimming party. Then he went to the Smokehouse, which was a local restaurant. He went there to listen to a prize fight, and he was home by 9 p.m. and in bed by 11 p.m. Louise then went on to say that Clarence had suffered a nosebleed a few days before, and so any blood found in her home could have been that incident. Kind of strange that she said that, but anyway. She said that Clarence had been upstairs in the attic the night of the murder, sound asleep. Louise was subsequently cleared in the investigation. Law enforcement's strategy was to start, with the circle of people closest to Mamie and then work their way out, pretty much what they do now. And they're not inexperienced investigators by any means, even by 1930s standards. According to the Logan Banner, just in June of 1932, the county had seen 6 murders, 2 suicides, and several other violent deaths that weren't necessarily the result of criminal activities.
Yikes.
These investigators had plenty of experience with violent crime and violent deaths. Harry Robertson and Clarence Stephenson were arrested for Mamie's murder later that evening and questioned all night and into the following day. Emmett Skaggs, the assistant prosecutor, directed the questioning, but no matter how intense the questioning or how tired Robertson and Stephenson became, they stood by their initial statements. Quote, "I don't know anything about her murder." On the 24th of June, Mamie Thurman's funeral was held at the First Baptist Church. By this time, Mamie's reputation had been dragged through the mud. receiving nicknames like the Vixen of Stratton Street and Logan's Most Popular Woman. The price tag for her funeral was $772.70, which is about $14,000 today.
That's a lot.
Mm-hmm. There doesn't seem to be any explanation as to how Jack Thurman could afford a $14,000 funeral for his wife when he couldn't even afford his own house. Not to mention, it was during the height of the Depression, and Jack paid for the funeral in cash.
Oh.
550 women attended the funeral, but only 30 men. And while people could be heard crying throughout the service, it's been suggested that many of the women who showed up at the funeral were just there to witness the demise of the harlot who tempted their husbands. Either way, the crowd saw one of the more unusual funerals in Logan, as no sermon was delivered. Reverend Gamble read the Bible scripture about a woman caught in the act of adultery and brought before Jesus, who told her to, go and sin no more. And then the Reverend made a reference to John 8, which Jesus tells people that he who hasn't cast the first stone. Quote, "This is the text," the Reverend said. "Develop your own sermon on that basis." After that, the Reverend read Mamie's obituary and the crowd dispersed. Could you imagine?
No.
Yeah, yada, yada, yada. Those who haven't, those that cast the first stone, you know that one. Go read it yourself later. Anyway, there's a lot of problems with this, but it was 1930s. The police searched the Robertsons' home during Mamie's funeral, looking for evidence. Bloody rags were found in the Robertsons' home, and blood stains were located on and under the floor mat in their automobile. Blood was also found on the front fender and a window of the vehicle. They found a .38 caliber gun in the home, but since no bullets were recovered from the dump site, it was impossible to match them to the weapon. Investigators also found hairs similar to Mamie's in the Robertsons' automobile, which, considering she was having an affair with Harry, that would be expected. The blood they found was later determined to be human blood, but there was no way to know who it belonged to. And the consensus was that even though blood was found in both Robertson's home and the automobile, there wasn't enough blood for either place to have been the murder scene. After all, when somebody's throat is sliced, they bleed out completely. You know that carotid artery?
Oh,
yeah.
Yes, I do.
However, most curiously, the back seat had been removed from the car and replaced with a tarp. But it was explained that the car was mainly used to transport the hunting dogs up to their hunting cabin. And the fact that the seat was removed didn't seem all that strange, and there was no blood on the tarp. Incidentally, the Robertsons' hunting cabin was located at 22 Mine Road, just a mile from where Mamie's body was found. If the cabin was searched, or if there was any evidence found there is no record of it now. The preliminary hearing for Harry Robertson and Clarence Stephenson got underway almost immediately. Clarence managed to retain two high-profile defense attorneys, C.C. Chambers and C.L. Estep. No explanation is given how an odd jobs man could afford a lawyer at all, much less two of that caliber. Both Stephenson and Robertson were brought before the magistrate. His name, Elba Hatfield, of the infamous Hatfield family.
And McCoy.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
In fact, he was the grandson of the devil Ants Hatfield. Clarence Stephenson understood his predicament. An example of what he faced was when he and Robertson were brought before Elba Hatfield. Clarence, the black odd jobs man, was in handcuffs. Harry, the white city official, was not.
Shocker,
yet,
I tell you. Shocker.
I know. And yet they were both under arrest for the exact same crime.
Yep.
After Elba Hatfield heard the preliminary evidence in which Louise Robertson gave an alibi for both men, and in which there was no physical evidence to link either of them to the crime aside from a minor account of human blood in the car, a vehicle that both men had access to, and an admission that Robertson was the one having an affair with the victim, Hatfield indicted Clarence Stephenson. But he didn't indict the powerful city official, Harry Robertson. Nobody's shocked these days
I honestly,
on that, right?
Yeah. What? Oh, wow. I'm utterly Shocked.
Mm-hmm. When the trial got underway, it is said to be attended by as many as 1,000 spectators a day. During questioning, when Clarence was up on the stand, people said he looked scared and nervous. I bet he was.
Yeah, I bet he was.
The lawyers often had to rephrase or repeat their questions to him. Clarence said that he had been given the 3rd degree during questioning, suffering abuse at the hands of his interrogators. The crowd in the courtroom cheered and applauded at the very idea of him being beaten. Prosecutor Skaggs, who also led the initial interrogation of Stephenson, jumped up and yelled in the courtroom, quote, "I'd have killed him myself if they had not prevented me." Skaggs was the prosecuting attorney, raging like a lunatic about he would have murdered Stephenson if given half the chance, and the courtroom again erupted into applause and cheering. Finally, when one of the lawyers asked Stephenson why he was so scared, Clarence looked out at the people, some of them making threatening gestures towards him, and he replied, quote, "If you could see what I see down here, you'd be frightened too." Elba Hatfield moved Stephenson to another county to ensure his safety. When it came down to the details of the night that Mamie Thurman was murdered, Harry Robertson said that he'd last seen Mamie on Saturday when Clarence Stephenson had driven him to the Crooked Creek for about an hour. He claimed he canceled their upcoming meeting for Tuesday night and that he'd never saw the victim the night of the murder. However, when Clarence took the stand, he confirmed that Robertson had canceled the meeting with Mamie on Tuesday night, but he had changed his mind. According to Clarence, on the night of the murder, Robertson asked him to go and fetch Mamie, but Clarence drove around and couldn't find her. He went to the Fanette Jones boarding house, but there were no lights on, so he went home to the Robertsons and listened to the prize fight with the Robertson family while Harry Robertson was at the restaurant listening to the fight. After it was over, Clarence went to the taxicab offices and discussed the championship fight with some of the people there. And then at 11, he said he had gone home to the attic and to bed, which Louise Robertson had corroborated. Aside from the middle of the night, Clarence's whereabouts were accounted for all evening. During the trial, neither Harry nor his wife Louise ever indicated that they thought Clarence was guilty. The opposite was also true. Clarence never once said or thought that Harry was guilty. In fact, in a letter to his sister from jail, Clarence begged her to help him and told her to pass on a message to Robertson that he would never, quote, tell lies on him. Aside from the circumstantial evidence against Clarence Stephenson, which was also the same evidence against Robertson, the prosecutors found witnesses who said that they saw Clarence Stephenson on 22 Mine Road the night of the murder. Myrtle Brown had been on Trace Mountain the night of the murder around 10 or 11 with a couple of men. When the men's, quote, behavior reached an uncomfortable level, she said she got out of the car and started walking down the mountain. She saw a black man driving a sedan, and she huddled down behind some bushes. She testified that she saw a white woman in the car with the man, and her head was leaning back in the seat. Then she said she heard 2 gunshots and saw the black man get out of the car, walk in front of the headlights, and then get back in the car. She stated that the man, quote, looked like Clarence Stephenson. At first, Myrtle didn't want to testify but changed her mind. However, the men she claimed that was with her, they said they weren't with her that night. They had been up at the mine. Now, the mine was not in operation at the time of Mamie's murder, so it's possible that they just used part of the mine as a place to drink and party illegally, which back then I think drinking was illegally, so the whole thing, you know. They said they saw a car with 2 men and a woman on the road that night. Another witness said that they saw Stephenson driving around town toward Holden at about 5:45 that morning. And in less than 1 hour, an all-white jury found Clarence Stephenson guilty of the murder of Mamie Thurman and sentenced him to life in prison, where he eventually died of stomach cancer in 1942. And Clarence maintained his innocence until the very end. And apparently, he wasn't the only one that felt that he was innocent or felt that at the very least there wasn't enough evidence to convict him. For one thing, the witnesses on Trace Mountain that night canceled each other out. I mean, Myrtle Brown claimed to be with 2 men who in turn said that they weren't with her. So right there, someone's lying. Myrtle said she saw one black man in the car, whereas the larger group of men say that they saw two men in the car and never mentioned that one was black. And you can't discount the fact that the people on the mountain that night were probably drunk.
Mm-hmm.
Also, aside from catching a glimpse of someone in the headlights, there aren't any lights on 22 Mine Road. So if a person were walking down the road in pitch dark, as Myrtle Brown claimed she was, she couldn't possibly have seen who was in the car. In addition, she claimed that the man got out of the car and walked in front of the headlights after she heard the shots, but there weren't any bullet holes or bullets found inside the Robertsons' vehicle. And how likely is it that somebody would shoot a dead woman as insurance inside their car, right? I mean, wouldn't they be more likely to shoot her once she was out of the car? And just to mitigate the mess, to clean that up. And if the back seat was out of the vehicle, why wouldn't Clarence have put Mamie's body in the back where it couldn't be seen instead of in the front seat like, Myrtle claimed?
Right.
All this to say that there are just too many holes in good old Myrtle Brown's statement that was used to convict Clarence.
Mm-hmm.
Once more, Louise Robertson's testimony clearly stated that Stephenson was at home with her at the same time Myrtle Brown said she saw him on the mountain. Louise Robertson's testimony was good enough to convince Elba Hatfield that her husband had nothing to do with the murder, but it just didn't seem to be good enough to convince him that Clarence had nothing to do with the murder. Clarence appealed his case based on the fact that the jury was all white and several other rulings that his counsel felt were unfair. The NAACP, over 50 local churches, and more than 3,000 people supported and raised funds for his appeal. But the Supreme Court of West Virginia rejected the appeal in 1933. The fact that so many people refer to this case as being unsolved when Clarence Stephenson was found guilty and died in prison revealed that most people feel that Stephenson is innocent, or at the very least, didn't act alone. The question also becomes whether or not Clarence got a fair trial, which doesn't really sound like he did.
Not at that time. I don't think any black man could get a fair trial. Are you kidding me?
With a dead white woman?
No. I'm surprised they even put him on trial.
I know. So, and I'm about to read some newspaper things, and this was all newspapers from 1933. Most of the West Virginia and Kentucky newspaper accounts at the time were painted Stephenson as guilty before the trial even started. The headlines were, Logan Negro is allowed appeal. Negro is accused of slaying woman, and testimony given by employer of accused Negro. The headlines rarely mentioned the influential citizen at the center of the whole ordeal, which was Harry Robertson, and instead kept driving home the fact that Clarence was a black man. However, in newspapers outside the area, like in Pennsylvania or New York, the headlines read, City official is arrested as love slayer of woman, and big West Virginia official cleared to blame, and love-slaying probe starts. People outside the area saw this case as a powerful man abusing his power. And at the same time, the local papers diminished Robertson's involvement and kept the focus on the fact that Stephenson was black. And theories in this case, they run the gamut. One theory is that Mamie's husband, Jack Thurman, found out about the affair and murdered her, which seems reasonable, right?
Yes.
This theory proposes that Jack called in to check at her at about 1 o'clock in the morning and didn't get an answer, so he went looking for her and found her with Harry Robertson. Or he just confronted her and she confessed the whole thing. And then he killed her in a blind rage. However, his whereabouts were accounted for by citizens and fellow employees that night. Another theory is that Louise Robertson murdered Mamie Thurman because she wouldn't stay away from her husband. After begging Harry to end the relationship, only to be lied to again and again, maybe Louise just snapped and murdered Mamie. Another theory is that Clarence murdered Mamie at either the request of Louise, Harry, or both. I mean, they were his bosses. He lived with them, he trusted them, and he considered them his friend. The theory is that Clarence murdered Mamie as a favor to the Robertsons. Louise's unusual comments about Clarence having the bloody nose, so if you find any blood in our house, it's probably from when Clarence had that bloody nose the other day.
Mm-hmm.
Or the comment about how she hoped both Mamie and her husband Harry lived so that if, quote, anything ever happened, her children wouldn't be discredited in the eyes of the people of Logan. That's pretty odd to say.
Well, yes.
So some people think that Clarence didn't kill Mamie, but that he did help the killer by firing the 2 sure shots into Mamie's skull and then dumping her down the mountain. A man who was in jail with Clarence said that Clarence told him he'd been hired just to dump the body, but he didn't know anything about who killed her. Now, not much stock was put into this fellow cellmate statement because he was never called as a witness, and Clarence never mentioned who had hired him. The cellmate also said that Clarence said, quote, "It was all politics." And honestly, there's very little motive for Clarence to have murdered Mamie. The theory that gets the most traction, though, is the one that Harry killed Mamie in a jealous rage or a moment of panic because she threatened to go public with the affair or for some other reason, like maybe she was pregnant.
Oh, Yep.
He then disposed of her body and asked Clarence to come help him clean up, or he asked Clarence to dispose of Mamie's body for him. Now, if this scenario were true, it could help to explain some of Louise's unusual comments, because if Mamie had been killed in her home, she would have had inside knowledge of what happened. But no matter how much it's proven statistically, women are often murdered by people who know them. And according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, 70% of female murders and 56% of male murders are perpetrated by someone known to the victim. And as many as 34% of female murders are committed by an intimate partner. And there's only one theory in this case of Mamie Thurman that often gets overlooked, and that might hold more weight than all the others. And that theory is that Mamie was killed deliberately, a premeditated execution, so to speak. You ready for this part? This is where it gets juicy.
Yes, I am, Jen. Yes.
In Logan, West Virginia in 1932, there was a social sex club.
What?
Prominent citizens met to have sex with people other than their spouses. Kind of swingers, I guess. Mm-hmm. And according to the Charleston Daily Mail, quote, "The existence of a rendezvous, a large room in a downtown office building, where at least a half-dozen prominent Logan men with their women friends met occasionally, was revealed during Harry Robertson's testimony. Robinson admitted that he and Mamie were members of this club and often frequented the place, which was located in the Holland building. This club was sometimes known as the Key Club or Amen Club, but publicly the club was known as the Logan Business Men's Club. Both male and female members even had pass keys." The Pittsburgh Press reported in an article titled "Secret Love Cult Expose Expected." And it went on to say prominent Logan businessmen believed involved. Revelation of a secret love society involving men prominent in the affairs of Logan was expected tomorrow when the preliminary hearing of Harry Robertson, accused of slaying the wife of a policeman, is resumed before Justice of the Peace Alba Hatfield. Robertson went on to testify that Mamie Thurman had written down the names of 16 men that she had, quote, affairs with, and she showed it to him. And of that list, Robertson said, quote, "One of the men is dead. All 3 live in the city of Logan, and all are married but one. The names of the men on that list were never made public."
That a little sounds familiar.
Well,
as
Epstein?
the things going on lately. Well, I wasn't going to name names, Jen.
I know.
There you go.
Now, most people assumed that Mamie showed Harry this list to anger him and to make him jealous, perhaps force him into divorcing his wife and marrying her. But their affair continued for over a year after she showed him this list. So what if Mamie showed him the list as some sort of leverage? What if she was threatening to expose the whole thing? I mean, maybe she was just a woman who knew too much. When you look at the facts of her actual murder, each theory seems to have a flaw, like an obvious flaw. Like medical examiners claim that the broken neck that Mamie suffered happened when she was thrown out of the vehicle, and that the gunshot wounds to the head were, in essence, like a double tap. They were meaning just to ensure that she was dead. And they were all in agreement that the gash in her neck was what killed her. And it's pretty difficult to slice somebody ear to ear, as we can assume, when you sever the trachea.
Mm-hmm.
A person needs to be able to render the victim immobile and stand behind her to accomplish that, pretty much. Or it must be done suddenly, catching the victim off guard. Otherwise, the victim's going to fight back, which causes lacerations or bruises to the hand, which Mamie didn't have. So this hardly seems like something Louise could have physically managed. It's not impossible, but if she had help, she could. The ear-to-ear gash also doesn't seem like something a person would do in a jealous rage. A murder committed in a rage involving a knife usually results in multiple stab wounds, lots of bruising, numerous stops and starts. And Mamie just suffered the one slice of the throat and a few bruises, almost as if the person who killed her had a lot of practice.
And there it is.
Could it be that she was murdered to silence her so that she couldn't tell people what she knew about the sex club? At the very least, regardless of who was responsible, it does seem as though her murder was planned. And, not to be too conspiratorial, but all the courtroom transcripts and all 17 depositions of this trial have gone missing. Shocker.
Again, I don't even know what to say.
I know. According to the Logan Banner, a road crew found some bloody rags and a knife wedged into a cliff facing 22 Mine Road just a few months after the trial. And it's unknown what happened to this evidence. It was never shown at an appeal, or even if it still exists. So as the humiliation of having her reputation destroyed after her being murdered wasn't enough, Mamie Thurman's grave has also gone missing. Her husband, who could afford that expensive funeral and paid for it in cash, apparently didn't have the money to buy a tombstone for her. Or by that point, he just didn't care anymore. When George Morrison, Mamie's half-brother, one of that was placed into an orphanage, discovered that Mamie was his sister, he traveled from New Mexico to West Virginia to put flowers on her grave in 1985. But when he got there, he found out that nobody knew where she was buried. It's now believed that Mamie is in an unmarked grave in the Logan Memorial Cemetery in McConnell. And it's thought that one of Clarence Stephenson's defense attorneys, C.C. Chambers, gave his plot to Jack to bury Mamie. And after giving that plot to Jack, Chambers bought plots elsewhere, and he's buried in a different cemetery. After the murder of Mamie Thurman, the city leadership of Logan was reorganized, you think? And Harry and Jack both found themselves without jobs. Jack remarried a woman named Clara in April of 1933 and moved back to Louisville, Kentucky, where he was a watchman for the Glenmore Distillery. And Jack Thurman never had any children. The Robertsons left Logan County and moved to another state. Both Harry and Louise were brought back to West Virginia for burial when they died. There are so many questions left unanswered in this case, including who's actually responsible for the murder of Mamie Thurman, because I don't really think it was Clarence.
Nor do I, my friend.
Yep. And the corruption angle, it's fascinating, right? Especially when you factor in things like how could Jack afford that expensive funeral? And Clarence, how could he afford those two high-profile defense attorneys? Plus, why have all the depositions and court transcripts disappeared? In the end, we are left with the sense that justice was not served and that much-needed investigation into the seedy underbelly of Logan was never carried out. Was Mamie murdered by her husband in a jealous rage? Or was she murdered by either one of the Robertsons, Harry or Louise? Or maybe she was murdered by Clarence Stephenson. She could have been murdered at the behest of those anonymous members of the sex club to keep her quiet, too. Which I'm leaning towards that.
That is true.
Now, what we have is the ghost story. And while many people have experienced their cars being pushed back up the hill on Trace Mountain, it's probably due to what scientists call a gravity trap.
Oh.
A gravity trap is an optical illusion created by the surrounding landscape. And according to Wikipedia, our good friend Wiki, a gravity trap is, quote, a place where the layout of the surrounding land produces an optical illusion, making a slight downward slope appear to be an uphill slope.
Interesting.
Yep. So, maybe there is a perfectly good explanation as to why it appears that cars being pushed back up the mountain But what if Mamie Thurman can't rest because justice...
She's mad.
Mhm.
She's mad.
Yep. So
Blame her.
she could be angry about being murdered, or her grave can't be located. But one thing we do know is there have been plenty of people that have seen her ghostly likeness walking the dark and secluded road on Trace Mountain. And some even claim to hear her screams in the night.
I take their word for it. And I do think, like, if this case would happen, I mean, I would think,
You'd
I
hope.
like to think, I would hope, if it happened more current day, there would be lots of answers, but
More of an investigation. I mean, it's clear looking as we see it now from the papers. I think it's pretty clear that Clarence wasn't responsible. But due to the color of his skin, he was the scapegoat. And
somebody's
I
got to pay. So there you
do
go.
believe that Mamie was killed by people of that club. Maybe not by people of the club, but she was
Somebody that
hired
knew
by
about it.
someone. Another theory is, too, maybe she went with somebody up the mountain and things got weird and she jumped out of the car and broke her neck.
And then they got
And
rid
they
of her.
got scared,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
they slit her throat. And then they're
Yeah.
like, well, maybe I should shoot her too, just in case. I mean, there's so many things that could have happened.
That's brutal. Ooh,
Horrible.
horrible.
But yeah, it's interesting.
Interesting case, especially for October.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean,
Spooky-tober.
it's obvious that Clarence didn't do it, but still.
I think that so many men and women of color have been sent down the river for things they never did.
Back then and now.
Tied up in a nice bow. Look, we got the person. Sure
Yeah.
you did.
It's easy. He's easy
Sure
to
you did,
do.
buddy.
Yeah,
Right?
it's easy to. Or even just the unwealthy, let's put it that way.
Yeah, there you go.
People without financial means, they're
Yep.
easier to target. But then again, like, who paid for Clarence's defense? Who paid Mamie's funeral? That's why it leads me to believe that it was one of the prominent men.
But somebody felt a little guilty.
Right.
Yep.
They wanted to get rid of her
I'm
before
going to help you,
their
but
names.
I'm
Right.
not going to help you that much.
Mm-hmm.
Well, good job, Jen.
And it's interesting.
Justice.
So
you know?
now I want to go on Trace Mountain and 22 Mine Road and see if Mamie will come sit
That'd
in
be
my
so
car with me
scary.
for a while.
Okay, you do that. You let me know how that goes. I'll be at the hotel watching TV, eating bonbons. Let me know if that goes okay for you. Yeah. Thanks. No thanks.
Yeah, it's just interesting how local legends become...
There has to be a little truth to them.
Right, exactly.
Somewhere along the way.
Mm-hmm. So
Mhm,
it's just
know.
interesting.
Do we have
Interesting.
anything we want to say to our friends?
We do have a promo after this for our good friend Edward October, for his Halloween spectacular.
October Pod VHS.
I believe his thing comes out on the 16th, and it kind of correlates for my next episode. So that's pretty fun, too. So you'll
Maybe
have
you
to
guys.
pay attention to Edward's.
It's almost like you planned it.
It is almost. We didn't, though. It just dawned on me that it's the same thing. Well,
I know.
kind of the same thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yay.
Interesting. You'll have to pay attention to Edward's drop on the 16th
And if
to
you
find
don't
out what mine's
recall,
going to be.
Edward does our listener description and
Yes.
is amazing and all that good stuff. Also, Jen, I just wanted to give a heads up that we recently had somebody book one of those
did.
seats. We did.
We did.
So that happened last week, I do believe.
One of our seats for our European Dark History Tour, which we're going to do the ghost stories just like today and the history behind them and all sorts of good fun stuff.
So if
So
you
excited.
are interested, make sure you reach out to us, www.ourtruecrimepodcast.com. You can reach us on that way. You can reach us on the X and the Facebook.
Just send us an email at ourtruecrimepodcast@gmail.com
There you go.
and ask. I'll give you all the information and it'll be fun. But real quick, if you guys, first time hearing this, would I be surprised, but we're going to start in Edinburgh, then we're going to go to York, and then we will end up in London, and it's going to be fun. A lot of fun. We've already got like 23 or 24 people going.
I believe our recent one's number 24.
I think so. Something like
and
that.
I think we
don't
only
know.
have openings to
But
what,
there's
26?
math to that. 26 for definite.
Yeah.
So if you
So if there's
want
you and
to
your
come-
bestie, you
Mhm.
and your spouse, you and your loved one, you and whoever, you and
Somebody-
your mom, you and your dad, you and your son, you and your daughter, you
Mhm.
and you. Come on. It's going to be super fun. Super
so
fun.
much fun. I cannot wait. So anyway, yeah, contact us and we'll get y'all set up and it'll be fun to hang out with you.
It'll be super fun.
10 days with us, which could be a nightmare for some, but
no, it's going to be a nightmare for me and you, let's be honest.
June 13th through the 22nd, 2025. So, I mean, you could ask for it for a Christmas present if, get donations, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
It'll be fun. But anyway, come join us. That's
right.
it. That's all I got.
All right. Love y'all. And remember, until next time, lock your doors.
Keep passing by those open windows.
Bye-bye.
Boo. Love ya. For more information about this episode, as well as all other sources, please check out our show notes or the podcast website at ourtruecrimepodcast.com. Our True Crime Podcast is developed and created by the hosts, Jen and Cam. Original music and audio mix of all our True Crime Podcast episodes is courtesy of Nico Vertese from We Talk of Dreams. You can reach Nico at wetalkofdreams.com. Listener discretion is provided by Edward October from OctoberPod VHS. You can find all of his great works on YouTube. Please make sure to like and subscribe to our True Crime Podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. We can be reached on Instagram and Facebook at Our True Crime Podcast or on Twitter with the handle at Our True Crime Pod. You can also email us at ourtruecrimepodcast@gmail.com. We would also at this time like to thank our patrons. We would be so lost without you. Thank you so much. And if you would like to help support the show, you can check us out on patreon.com/Our True Crime Podcast. You can also show your support by leaving a 5-star review on Apple or simply just tell your friends about us. It's that easy. Love ya.
There's a special night in the lives of all of us. A night to be daring. A night to be desirable. A night when we can break all the rules and make our own. It's coming to OctoberPod. Everyone is getting ready for Halloween night. It's a time for assembling costumes, putting on makeup, and making last-minute phone calls to your date for the costume party.
Hello? Is there somebody there?
Do you like classic horror stories?
Who's scaring me?
Spirits from an age gone by. Speak again. The immortal tale of Frankenstein.
Even if you're too old for trick-or-treat, Edward October still has a terrifying treat for you this Halloween. The Satanic Rites of Frankenstein. This Halloween season, OctoberPod presents 4 terrifying new visions of Mary Shelley's immortal classic, Listen to the Satanic Rites of Frankenstein, a special Halloween event presented by OctoberPod AM. Your very soul may depend upon it.
Starts playing Tuesday, October 15th. Listen to OctoberPod AM on Spreaker, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts. Check local listings.